نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, my dear sisters and brothers. I hope that your Ramadan is going beautifully so far, and inshallah today what we'll talk about a little bit is the relationship of the Prophet ﷺ with his wives specifically, but we want to expand. And the reason I think it's important to talk about this is because, Ramadan essentially is a time for us to build our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is in its essence, a relational time, right? Through our gratitude, through our ibadah, we are establishing a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we want to make sure that we don't focus on that aspect at the expense of our other relationships. We want to make sure that our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is grounded in the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the best example of a balance, that he was the most beloved. He is Habibullah, and he had the most compassion and empathy and softness and kindness to everyone around him. And specifically, we'll look at examples that come through his marriages. So we're going to start by looking at the Prophet ﷺ, and one of the foundations of a relationship that we learn through his marriage to Khadija radiallahu anha, and that is trust. Trust is the core, it's the foundation of any relationship. And if you think about it, even in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is listening to us is so foundational, right? وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala builds our trust through ayat that remind us, when my slave asks you about me, I am certainly near. Right? He doesn't even say, tell them that he takes out, فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, certainly I am near. Right? And so that's a trust factor, this reliability. So that's what trust is. And we build that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, we need to be making sure that the relationships closest to us, we're also cultivating trust in those. Right? And so trust is not just about honesty. It is about reliability. It is about emotional safety and believing that this other person has our best interest at heart. How do you do that? Well, trust develops in moments where there's something that's a little bit shaky. And the example that I love from the seerah is in the marriage of the Prophet ﷺ to Khadija radiallahu anha, because the trust that there was in that relationship was unwavering. And it really created this beautiful foundation for their marriage. And the time when the Prophet ﷺ he receives the first revelation and he is shaken up. And it's a moment where he doesn't know what's happening. And he comes to Khadija radiallahu anha and he tells her, I don't know what's happening, right? I'm unsure of myself. In that moment where the Prophet ﷺ he doesn't know if he can trust himself, what is happening? Khadija radiallahu anha's trust in him and his character doesn't waver, not even for a single second. Right? She, in that moment of vulnerability, she reassures him and tells him, by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You keep good relationships with family, you help the poor and the destitute, you serve your guests generously, and you assist those who are in distress. Right? Just like that, she's able to say his positive qualities. I mean, imagine in that moment the support that the Prophet ﷺ feels, the trust that Khadija radiallahu anha must have in him to say, I know you. You're not crazy. You're solid. Allah is never going to disgrace you. Right? And so this is what relationships are built on. Trusting in each other's goodness, even when the other person is struggling, right? And how does that happen? Trust is reinforced through consistency, showing up in small ways. And this is essentially what Khadija radiallahu anha did for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was there for him consistently as he was for her, right? Even in moments where she could have swayed, right? When he would constantly go up to the cave of Hira and spend time in solitude, and the gossip mongers were there. There were whispers in the community. Oh, he's going up there and, he's spending so much time away and she does so much for him. She could have gotten swayed by everything that people were saying. But she not only didn't fall into assumptions or negative thought processes, she supported him. She brought him food, right? And so we see that so many times, in my work with couples, I see that there are these assumptions that couples make. The husband is making assumptions about his wife's intentions, and the wife is making assumptions about her husband's intentions. Oh, you don't prioritize me. Oh, I don't matter to you, right? These assumptions really deteriorate the core of the relationship. Having a negative assumption about your spouse, having a negative assumption about somebody else. So if somebody looks at us the wrong way or doesn't greet us, we assume, oh, this person is mad at me, or this person doesn't like me. We don't think of saying, oh, maybe this person is going through a hard time. Maybe they were preoccupied. Having husnul dhann is at the core of having trust, right? Having a good opinion of the people around you. Because if we have bad opinions, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Things are just going to feel like they prove that negative opinion that we have. But if you have husnul dhann, you'll assume good of the other person in front of you, and most importantly, your spouse. And when you do that, you'll be able to respond to them in a way that's loving and kind because you assume the best of them. And that's going to create a cycle of positivity between you, right? Trust is also about vulnerability. It's part and parcel of it, right? The Prophet ﷺ, I want you to think about this. He could have literally gone to anybody. This is before prophethood, before the opposition to the message, right? He could have gone to his best friend Abu Bakr, radiallahu anh. He could have gone to his uncle Abu Talib. These were supporters of his. These were men. But he didn't go to them, right? He went to his wife. That's where he found the most safety in being vulnerable, where he could come and say, I'm in a tough spot, and not worry about judgment, and know that he's going to have unwavering support in that moment. And this is the definition of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines marriage as. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنْ, that you are garments for one another. What do garments do? Garments conceal our faults. They cover up any shortcomings that we have. You have a scar, you have a wound, you have scabs, you have anything. Your garments cover it up. They beautify you. They dignify you, right? The clothing that you wear gives you a sense you can walk taller, you can walk a little bit with more confidence. Right? This is the role that spouses have towards one another. It's not just beautification, but it's dignity. It's a sense of safety, of being, protected from the elements, right? When you go out in the winter and it's snowing, you wear a coat, your garments protect you from what's going on outside. Just like that, spouses are meant to protect each other, shield each other from the harms that are outside of their bubble, the bubble of their relationship. That bubble is one that should be of safety. That's how trust is developed. And so the question that you want to ask yourself is that when my spouse is stressed out, or when someone that I love is stressed out, when they're anxious, when they're not showing up in their best way, do I help maintain their dignity? Do I provide emotional safety? Or do I expose the weakness, or mock the weakness, or make it an I told you so moment, or a moment of retribution of, yeah, that's what you get? What do you respond to your loved one's stress with? How do you show up for them in those moments? Or do you hold grudges, right? This is a moment of self-reflection. Because a lot of times also the other thing I see with a lot of the clients I work with as a therapist is that the way that they see themselves in relation to other people in this dunya is how they also see themselves in relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person holds grudges and believes that people are out to get them, they're likely also to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have their best interests at heart. And so it's really important also to pay attention, and is there a parallel between how I see people and how I see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I able to see the best in people? Because that will likely also help you see the best in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially in the moments where things are not going as planned. The second piece that I think is a beautiful part of the Prophet ﷺ's relational intelligence is his communication. The communication of the Prophet ﷺ shows us that it's not just about listening. It's not just about speaking. It's about connection. Strong communication skills allow two people to connect in a way where they feel understood, in a way where each of them feels heard, in a way that each of them feels dignified. Again, I want this idea of feeling dignified, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he was someone that didn't just listen, but he responded in a way that was, again, it was just so attuned. It was so connected and connecting with others around him. And we see this in his conversations with various Sahaba, right? There's a Sahaba who said that, everyone who spoke to the Prophet ﷺ thought that he loved them the most. Why? Because of how he was with them in those moments that he was communicating with them, right? And there's a beautiful story of when Aisha radiallahu anha, she has come back from a gathering with many other women, and they were all describing their husbands. And there was particularly one woman, Zara, who described her husband in this beautiful manner, and she was really complimenting how much he loved her and how much love he gave to her. And the Prophet ﷺ listened to the whole thing, the whole story, everything Aisha radiallahu anha said with patience. But it wasn't just that he was just like, okay, yeah, sure, okay, is this over? No. When she was done, he responded in this beautiful, loving way. He acknowledged what she said, but he also said then, I am to you as Abu Zar was to Zar. Meaning that I love you that much. And so we see, that this wasn't passive listening. He not only acknowledged her, but he responded to her. And this, in the Gottman framework, is called, responding to a bid. When your spouse says something or does something, whether it's, it seems small, but you respond to it in a loving way, right? So active listening is actually a way of showing love in action. And this, again, it's not just with your spouse. Maybe it's with your kids. Maybe it's with your friends. Maybe it's with your parents. Maybe it's with, your colleagues at work, right? How do you respond? Do you actually listen? And as we're inundated with social media and technology, it's becoming harder to really focus, right? How many of you watching this right now are also on your phone or also scrolling something else, right? We're always multitasking. And okay, this is on a screen, sure, no problem. But when you're actually engaging with another human being, are you able to actually fully attend to them the way the Prophet ﷺ did? Are you able to express affection or appreciation in a way like the Prophet ﷺ did, where Aisha radiallahu anha, I just imagine how special she felt in that moment. The Prophet ﷺ had a way of speaking to people that was gentle, even when he corrected others, right? Following, giving us, a model of the Quranic concept of وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, speak to people with kindness, right? This is a general advice of the Quran. How much more does it apply to our own families, to the people that we are closest to, right? And, current research in the Gottman's research shows that healthy couples, healthy marriages have so much of an abundance of these positive interactions, small but consistent, to the point where the positive interactions outnumber negative interactions 5-1. I mean, that is, to me, just, it's amazing to see that. I mean, it makes sense, right? But to say, wow, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio in a healthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, the ratio is 5-1. This means that for every small conflict or criticism or, small annoyance, that there are 5 acts of kindness, of appreciation, of support, a gesture of love, right? And so I want you to think about this. Again, think about the relationships that you have. Maybe the ones that you're struggling with. How often do you express love? How often do you express appreciation compared to how often you express complaints or criticisms? When we can learn to communicate with kindness, with appreciation, in ways where the positive outnumber the negative. You're never going to have a relationship that's free of negative interactions. You're human beings. You're going to be annoyed with one another, and that's okay. But it's about, are we putting in a concerted effort to make the positive more? Just like when we think about like the month of Ramadan, right? No one's going to have a perfect month of Ramadan, but are you making a concerted effort to make this month one that has way more good deeds than slip-ups, right? And so we want to make sure that we are being cognizant of it, that we're being conscious, that we're being intentional. When we do that, it lays the groundwork. It creates the possibility to have more compassion. Compassion in relationships is not just empathy. It is emotional intelligence. It is supporting one another through difficult times, right? The Prophet ﷺ was excellent at this. You know, an example that I just always smile about is when he told Aisha radiallahu anha, I can tell when you're mad at me. And she said, how? How do you know? And he said, well, when you're fine with me, when you're happy with me, you say, I swear by the Rabb of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when you're upset with me, you say, I swear by the Rabb of Ibrahim. And so I want to, like, it's so beautiful because he caught the nuance. He could tell that she was upset and he's letting her know, I listen to you, I pay attention to you. And he's not upset at her for being upset. And he's not saying to her, oh, that's so disrespectful. No, he's saying, I hear you, I see you, I get you. I'm paying attention to you. You matter to me. Your emotions matter to me. And her response is just as beautiful. And she says, I don't leave out anything but your name. Meaning, I still love you. Yeah, I'm mad at you. But your name might not be on my tongue, but in my heart, the love is still there. Right? And so we see this interaction where when one person is upset, the other one is not responding with upset. Right? Compassion comes into play in the moments where there is conflict, in the moments where there is an upset, in the moments where something is feeling a little ruptured. That's where compassion comes in. That's where the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated love and care. Compassion also comes in consistency and intentionality. Right? Like the Prophet ﷺ, when Aisha radiallahu anha would drink from a cup, he would take it and he would put his lips in the same place where her lips radiallahu anha had rested, right? What a beautiful display of love. It's such a romantic gesture. And he would do these things that are seemingly small, but he would do them consistently. This is what love is built on. This is how emotional intelligence works in relationships, that he knew this would be meaningful for her. He knew it would touch her heart when he did this, right? And so I want you to think about these relationships that we have in everyday life. How do we show compassion? Do we get so caught up in conflict and being frustrated and being annoyed and offended that we forego the small acts of compassion? When someone is upset with us or we recognize that someone is upset with us, do we respond with compassion, with understanding, saying, I get you, I see that you're upset. I'm here for you. Even though you're upset, you might be upset with me, but I am here for you and I still love you. Or do we respond with getting upset or offended that they're upset with us or frustrated or saying, you know what, stop being upset. So many people, so many of the relationships that I see in the therapy room, right? One spouse gets upset and the other one just wants to fix it. Doesn't want to actually pay attention and say, hey, what's going on? I got you. We just want the upset to go away. The Prophet ﷺ didn't tell Aisha radiallahu anha, don't be upset. He said, I'm paying attention to you. I got you, right? And so again, this shows up in moments. Compassion shows up in moments of stress. Don't let stress, don't let moments of where you're maybe hungry or hangry throw a wrench into your kindness. Don't let those moments take away opportunities. Don't let them suck away the kindness and compassion that you can have. You know, oftentimes we're very patient outside, but we lose it quickly at home. We're willing to be kind to strangers, but we come home and we're harsh with our own families, with our spouses and our children and our parents and our siblings. The Prophet ﷺ, he told us that the best of you are the ones that are best to your wives, and I am the best to my wives. Right? He was the kindest to his family. And the Quran teaches us, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with your spouses in the most beautiful way. You might not like something about them, but Allah has placed great goodness in them for you. It's in the Quran. And so again, kindness isn't just when things are going well. It is especially necessary in moments of conflict. And that's what, if we look and read relationship books and, psychology books, this is what we learn. It's not grand gestures that make a relationship great. It is the consistent gestures of love, just like the Prophet ﷺ taught us that the deeds that are most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ones that may be small, but they are consistent. That is because that's what relationships are built on. They are built on consistency. And so now I want you to think about the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was the most connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was the most compassionate, the most empathic, the kindest of people with others around him. Trust and healthy communication and compassion are not just like good traits to have. They are part of us following the best example of the Prophet ﷺ. They are essential in us being from the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are essential for us to build not just thriving homes, but thriving communities. This Ramadan, as we move towards the end of it, I want you to be aware of this. I want you to be intentional in your relationships. Try to think about how do you show up. Make a shift. And that might be, what can you do more of? Is there a way that you can show love or compassion to someone within your family, within your home, in a way that you haven't done before? Something that you're able to do consistently. Can you implement that now? Make the starting time now. Let it carry through the rest of this month, and inshallah after this month as well. And last, but definitely not least, probably actually the most important thing, is don't forget to make dua for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to heal, to help, to make your relationships thrive. Whether it's your marriage, whether it's your relationship with your kids, or whoever it is that is around you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to respond to our relationships with wisdom. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the compassion, the clarity, and the ability to communicate in ways that deepen our relationships, not in ways that break the ties and the hearts apart. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability to approach conflict with groundedness and compassion. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a successful Ramadan.